Aloha, welcome to PTC 24 in Honolulu. Joining me now is Randy Brouckman, Chief Executive Officer at EdgeConneX. And Randy, always a pleasure speaking to you.
Always a pleasure.
And we finally made it happen this year after a few lift issues.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us up the staircase, they wouldn't let us up the lift, and apparently you were just hiding there, having a great time
for 2 days, basically.
Pretending you were working, right?
Yeah, well, always pretending. But how are you finding the conference so far? I mean,
wonderful. This conference continues to be one of my busiest weeks of the year. You get an opportunity to meet, most importantly, your customers, but also a lot of your other ecosystem partners. So it's going well, staying busy. I wish
not busy.
I wish we had 4 days, not 2, but you get in what you can get in.
Can always extend the trip a little bit.
Yeah.
But one of the main topics that we've been hearing here, both on the corridors and on the center stage, and you had a session this morning as well where you guys touched on the topic. This is a bit of an uncertain year, a bit of a balancing act here with so many elections around the world. Half the world is going to elections. There's a few conflicts all around, which can go one way or the other and will have a big impact in the industry. I just want to gather your thoughts on first your thoughts on what's happening in the world, how does that impact the industry, and how does a company like EdgeConneX navigate all that? And we've been through a lot. I mean, COVID, recessions and all that. So, but I think this year things are slightly different. So, on to you.
Not to put words in your mouth.
It's a lot of questions in one, but big questions.
Up in there. I think essentially you're asking about some of the geopolitical factors, which we typically don't spend a lot of time on at this conference. Look, I think, simply put, it's real, right? We'd like to believe it's temporal and a short-term set of issues, but I think it's probably, there are certain areas that are more serious and won't be resolved quickly, right? I hope saner minds prevail. I do believe most of the populace in almost every country in the world wants peace.
We hope so.
Yeah, people seem to crave peace, like peace. Obviously, we don't have peace on a global scale right now. But if I look at it, I think of a few things. First of all, you do have a tremendous amount of elections this year on a global scale. Elections often have bigger predicted ramifications than actual ramifications. Governments are remarkably inefficient, which is beneficial. And
that's not exclusive to a single country. That's
correct. That's correct. It's true on
across the board.
For the most part, on a universal scale. But look, let's touch on some things. When you're making capital allocation decisions today, you are including in your decision-making processes some of the geopolitical factors that go into play. We think about it even on structuring. Well, does this belong under an Asian entity or a US entity or a European entity? When you start to think about how to structure the company, you start to think about where to allocate your capital. You start to adjust your risk return profile when you do this. I worry a little bit, right? We don't need the war to spread in the Middle East. That's also going to impact potentially cost of capital and ability to raise certain investment types of dollars. That puts that at risk. Obviously, the world's 2 largest economies are going to have to find a way to work together.
Sit at the table, yeah.
Right? We find an uncomfortable peace in Southeast Asia. More importantly, I'd probably say the Southeast Asian governments have figured out how to balance that. But the reality is that we're going to need to find a balance. I do think you're going to see deglobalization happening.
Yeah, we're already seeing it. Yeah.
Where you're going to see capabilities move sometimes in the country or in the region and those types of things. And while that has somewhat of an impact maybe on the digital infra, it's not as bad in that case. But it's a real factor. It comes into play. It's probably going to take longer term than we think. And there's a couple of unpredictable situations, one in Asia, obviously one in the Middle East, on how things could play out and how good it could be, or frankly, how bad it could be.
Yeah.
So we're cognizant of it, we're sensitive to it. And I don't want to say for the first time, but probably more pronounced than traditionally, it's a factor in our decision. It's a factor in where you put capital in. It's a factor in where you spend capital, and what currencies you need to do business in. So it touches on all aspects.
I think what you just said, how heavy it is weighting on people's shoulders right now, we see it here. It is on everyone's mouth, and you just have to look at some of the speakers on the list this year, from the Department of Defense, from several places like that, where you can tell, all right, there are discussions happening because we need this. We need to connect spaces. We need to do all that. So my follow-up question on that, and then we'll move into a bit of a brighter picture for the sector. It's what does a contingency plan look like should the worst happen? Because I mean, everyone here is probably starting to work on something, and hopefully we won't have to use it.
Yeah, look, I think I'm in the data center space, and so depending on which parts of this digital infrastructure you play in,
and subsea is probably the one that's going to get impacted at least the first.
Feel it the most. I think they're already feeling it with what's in the realm of can and can't happen, even on the infrastructure that can be built and can be permitted and licensed. Data centers may be the last, because you can do those as a global network, you can do them as a regional component of the infrastructure, and you can do it as a national one. And it's just, and frankly, the same data center can service any of those. So in some ways it becomes the least impacted, but what do I think it's going to do? Look, I think you'll see, I think you'll see folks make investments in stable governments, stable currencies. Could be less stable currencies, but underwritten to a stable currency. You're going to see, I think, India grow more. You have the world's largest democracy. You have an amazing rise of the middle class. Depending on who you believe, who you read, who you write. I happen to get to go to India a lot. You know, we have an EdgeConneX joint venture that is best thing I could have ever hoped for. Right, checks every box, and then
we just spoke to one of your partners in the cultural synergy. The conversation revolved around cultural synergy this time, so it's quite interesting.
Everything. But I look at that and I think, we 2030, if not 2030, 2040, I think is India's decade, right? And maybe that brings a nice balance to all the parties, right? It's kind of neutral. It's kind of the world's neutral democracy, and an incredibly well-educated workforce, rising middle class, technology savvy, technology hungry society. There's some things that might help. We invest heavier in some and probably step back and look a little more cautious at others. And
maybe, is it correct to say this year is maybe a bit less risk-taking with some markets?
Or balancing risk reward.
Balancing the act, okay.
Right. Or balancing risk reward. I think the other thing we've done is, we're owned by EQT. Nice to be owned by the Swedes.
They like the...
it takes a lot of the politics out. Not all, but it takes a lot of the politics out. It's a great fund, and happens to be not so much in the eye of the storm as some of the others. So that's also allowed us the flexibility to say, hey, what group of assets belong as an Asia-centric set of assets? Which one belong as US, and which ones belong maybe as European-based, all the way up through to the top level of the company. So we can actually balance the risk by not over-indexing one way or the other.
I mean, we had Jan Velsay, I think, the partner of EQT, speaking this morning as well, and he kind of described more or less what you said. And it seemed fairly stable, and the way they approach the different parts of the portfolio between data centers to fiber and the other asset classes within digital infrastructure.
Right. And then in our case, we're trying to balance it geographically. So we're not over-indexed in one. Frankly, that does a couple of things. As one goes up, the other one may go down, but it allows you to kind of serve the needs on a more consistent basis than we've seen historically. Okay,
and now going to the pinky side of the industry, because we need some good news as well. So I mean, AI, probably one of the best news that we can have. COVID, as bad as COVID was for the world, but for the industry, COVID delivered a lot of growth and a lot of expansions. But AI is going to be COVID times 10, times 20. And we're talking about the next 10 years. So if we talk about the next few decades and century, then we don't even know what's going to happen. What's your views, and how is this going to go in the next 5, 7, 8 years? And how do you get the money for it?
So how do we see EQT, and a few others. But let's take it in parts. So you mentioned COVID. Look, COVID was the proof of the value and power of digital infrastructure.
It's very educational.
Right. It finally, the world woke up to recognize it is more infrastructure. The digital highways that we've built, the data centers, the fiber networks, et cetera, are possibly more valuable assets and more infrastructure than the roads and bridges, right? Because you didn't need the roads or bridges in order to be able to work and continue, right? That's a maybe a little overstated, but it's where it goes. And it's interesting, the workforce changed after COVID, where people work,
Life
when they
changed.
work, a lot of things changed. Where you can recruit and fill positions in a labor-challenged market opened up because of it. And that hasn't slowed down, that's sped up. So along comes AI. And I said this morning, and I'll say it again. I am so blessed to have lived through a few technology revelations. I happened to be there when PC was introduced, dating ourselves a little bit. I was certainly there on the ground floor when the internet rolled out and saw an entire economy built on that, right? Half the GDP growth in the world, result of the internet. Fast forward a little bit beyond that, and you see mobile and cloud kind of both hitting. So now you have a whole different economy and sets of companies that didn't even exist before be formed. Add to that the ability to do it with less capital because you're taking advantage of the cloud more efficiently with resources anywhere in the world. It all just dovetailed perfectly, and now along comes AI. And I actually believe AI is a double hit. It's got a little bit of the elements of mobile where it changes how you work, and it's got a little bit of the elements of internet, which is it becomes a platform for a next generation of industry. I fundamentally think the first wave of AI is going to permeate existing workflows, existing industries, and existing job functions and tasks. You're going to see it. You're going to see efficiencies gain that we hadn't thought about before. You're going to see impacts. Maybe some of the menial tasks go down, and the opportunity for people to spend their time on less menial tasks and more other tasks. I think there's an interesting thing there. But I think as we go from generative to general AI, and you really get it think of it as a cloud-based offering in some ways, right? AI as a service, whether it's building your own LLM for your own company or industry, or just some general capability. We're going to see a set of companies that you and I don't know the name today.
I find it's the most fascinating part of it all.
Hasn't been founded yet, or if it has been, it's some little VC fund that found it, that are going to be multi-billion upon tens of billions of dollar companies in 5 to 8 years. We're going to see
It's going to be fast.
It's going to be fast. Pace of change never slows down. I think AI is going to accelerate that pace of change. And it's going to give folks the ability to have, it's data, right? It's pattern recognition on data today.
Well, you used to say data is the new oil. I mean, it's beyond oil.
Beyond oil, right? Now it's actually refined, right? It's really quite incredible. So we're excited about it. Obviously, in the data center industry, it creates a tremendous amount of opportunity. But with that opportunity comes a tremendous amount of responsibility and, frankly, engineering prowess required to support cloud. And by the way, we're not done with cloud. Cloud has got a huge amount of growth. And depending on what region you're in, it's even more than AI, right? And of course, AI, I think you're going to see a blurring of cloud and AI. It lends itself to being a service for the amount of data you need and the amount of compute power you need.
It's mind-blowing.
Can do it, right? So let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things about the industry as well is all these market reports that we see from analysts. They're always wrong, but in a good way, because it's never enough. They never predict.
They always get it wrong, right?
It's a good wrong.
Remember, one of the senior managers at one of the U.S. hyperscalers always said, whatever we tell you, multiply by 10.
Yeah.
Because we always get it wrong. I'll tell you what.
And that's where we're going now with AI.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that the other thing we've seen, and we talked about this, plays a little bit back into the geopolitics, is we are starting to see, really last year, you started to see not just the big 3 or 4 or 5 U.S. hyperscalers needing it. You saw a new class of companies emerging that need a fair amount of capacity. And I'm seeing requests from some of the Chinese hyperscalers, for example, or Asian hyperscalers, orders of magnitude on a global basis that we've never seen before. So something's happening.
Yeah, but this is the thing, because even though we do focus more on the darker period that we're going through, there's still a lot of business happening. There's a lot of Asian business coming into Europe and from Europe into Asia. And we've seen, especially in Finland, some of the acquisitions there done by Chinese players or other operators, just to be able to build that bridge, and how the Middle East is trying to position itself as well to be the bridge of the world along those kind of lines.
I think that's great. Seeing that in Scandinavia Navy first. And we'll bridge through.
Well, because unfortunately then things got to be closed. But I mean, so you've got, so you're of course backed by equity. You got recently you got another investment from them as well. This is about Need to Look for Infrastructure 6 fund. You have 80 data centers, 50 plus markets. You've got Share in China. You've got the EdgeConneX in India. You've got Abwitis Infra Capital in the Philippines. Abwitis in the Philippines. So you're all over the place, and I guess as we deglobalize, probably we need to do a round of the world a bit more specifically to each region. But tell us a few of the highlights of the last 12 months, and then at the same time, based on everything we just talked about of AI, how you're also deploying the right sustainability measures into all of that within the different jurisdictions.
Okay, so a little bit on the last 12 months. You're correct. We continue to see growth in, I'll break it into 3. Latin America is kind of a 4th region that we operate in as well. But if I look at Europe, we see a tremendous amount of cloud and some AI growth. If I look in Asia, tremendous amount of cloud growth with a little bit of AI. India, early innings in both, but huge opportunity, right? It just continues to be a market that is obviously underserved, both I think on a connectivity standpoint and certainly from a data center perspective. And people want a super high-end quality product to really power the next 20, 30 years of digital infrastructure there. So it's a big opportunity there. In the US, some cloud always. You see a more advanced migration to the cloud of enterprises. I think the US has hit that tipping point where if you're not on the cloud as an enterprise, you are now behind, well behind. It's a matter of maybe not all workloads, but what ones go, what ones stay hybrid, what ones go to public. But you do see a lot of, obviously, more AI here maybe than other places right now. But I think we're traditionally, maybe things were a 2 to 5 year lag. Wouldn't shock me if those turn into 1 to 2 year lags.
It's a speed of change right now.
Yes, as things accelerate on a global scale.
Okay, and then just bringing the sustainability side into it, because I mean, in India, you partner with Adani. Adani is bringing 25 gigawatts of energy on the ground, not just purely for data centers, but part of it's going to go into data centers. So sustainability,
I was going to kind of save that. It deserves its own topic, not part of the question.
So okay, sorry. All right. No, so you're teaching me a lesson.
No, this is. Somebody said it's table stakes, and to some degree it is, but we have to do more, and we can do more. And the great news is there are, I'm going to give the U.S. hyperscale companies real credit. If you're not, they are pulling anybody who's not pushing to get there themselves. They have been amazing, and they do it for the right reasons. First of all, they can, but secondly, we need to and we should, right? It's an industry that consumes a lot of power. So let's make that green power. Let's try to offset it ultimately hour by hour if we can, and put new power on the grid. Let's build in a sustainable way. Let's do everything with health and safety first. So like in India, we bring everybody up to our Western European facilities in a construction site and in an operations job, because that's the standard that we want no lower than, right? And so it has to become hardwired. At EdgeConneX, we have it's pretty simple. Take care of our customer, we take care of our people, and we take care of the planet.
And the business then just follows along.
The business follows it. And so, people, customers, and planet, right? And we say it and we live it each time. And I'll say that I think we always kind of knew the planet. We've tried to rewire ourselves to make it core to our DNA. And by the way, that means doing the right thing. So we're Scope 1 and 2 carbon neutral. We did a huge effort this year to take on a big chunk of the Scope 3. We're now science-based, so we're transparent. That's hard to get accepted into the science-based measures. We had our first waste-free data center last year, which is outstanding. So now we're permeating that through the entire footprint. And then we are committed to water neutral, or frankly, because of India, we want to be water positive, potable water positive. You won't see us do water-intense solutions. They'll have water, but it'll be closed loop, if you will.
Okay.
We're not going to be big water consumers. We're going to have to deal with that in the AI world, right? We're going to have to find the right technology mix of air and water to the chip, to the rack, et cetera, that we can do that. Because we all know that water is also a scarce resource. and expensive from a power perspective to make power. So
I think
to do.
the beauty of it as well is that even though we are talking about a lot of constructions right now, we are still very much at the beginning of this sector still. So we can still do very well in terms of sustainability if we do it now, if we start building right now.
I guess I see all of my peers, certainly my customers, it is at the forefront of how we're thinking and how we're acting. And we probably don't do enough to share that with the world.
That's an industry-wide problem.
It's an industry-wide problem. But I think as much as any other industry, this one is trying to be at the bleeding edge and needs to be.
Yeah, we're just not very good at telling the story sometimes.
Too many engineers.
Yeah.
I don't know people in marketing, too many engineers, says the engineer.
That's good. But look, I'm just going to shift off time. So in 12 months' time, when we come back here, what's the one thing that you think is achievable and the industry really needs to get their grasps on that you would like to be seen concretized when we meet here again in 12 months?
Wow.
It's a Christmas wish, basically 12 months before Christmas.
I think a few things will transpire over the course of this year. I think you're going to see some stability in the geopolitical stuff we're talking about right now, or at least clarity around how you're going to assess it and value it. I think from a technology perspective, you're going to see kind of a truing up of how do I roll out the architectures that can blend and flow between AI to traditional cloud and be able to easily go through that. I think you're going to learn in AI that inference and LLMs, it's the same tech, it's just
readjusting
what workloads going there. And I think you're going to see real case studies where AI has had a positive impact. I fear we're also going to see one or two where it's had a negative impact. And next year we'll be talking about regulatory frameworks that people are talking about today, but there's no specificity.
We haven't seen the real thing yet.
So I think that's probably where we're at next year.
All right, that'll be interesting. So next year we'll talk about regulation then.
I hope
we'll start preparing bring in the lawyers.
But it'll change where you build, what you build, how big
and how fast you can build it as well, probably. That's the other big issue that we were discussing this morning with someone. It's the speed at which you can get through all this. So that'll be interesting. But Randy Brouckman, CEO of EdgeConneX, thank you so much for talking to me. It's always a pleasure.
Always. Thanks.
Thank you so much. As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website and social media for more timely news from the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At Tech Capital, you lead, we report.